I'm Natalie, 29 years old, and I've spent my entire life being the family disappointment. My tiny Chicago apartment doubles as my art studio, while my sister Amber thrives as a corporate lawyer in New York. Last Christmas, my father uttered the words that cut deeper than any before: "Your sister is successful and responsible unlike you, doesn't need help." I never imagined those words would haunt us all when my phone rang at 2 a.m. 3 months later, changing everything I thought I knew about success. Before I dive into my story, where are you watching from today? Hit that like and subscribe button if you've ever felt like the family black sheep. Trust me, this journey might change how you see your own. Growing up in suburban Minneapolis, I always felt like a splash of color in a grayscale world. Our neighborhood was all manicured lawns and sensible sedans, a perfect backdrop for my father Thomas's orderly life. A former military man turned successful business executive, Dad approached parenting with the same precision he applied to everything else. Everything had a place, a purpose, and a plan. My mother Diane was my sanctuary. While Dad focused on achievements and milestones, Mom saw the beauty in my messy creativity. I'd spend hours in our basement with watercolors and sketchbooks, creating worlds that made sense to me when the real one didn't. "Your imagination is a gift, Natalie," she'd whisper, hanging my artwork on the fridge despite Dad's sighs about the clutter. Then there was Amber, my sister, 2 years older and seemingly perfect in every way. While I struggled to remember my homework or keep my room tidy, Amber was a marvel of efficiency. Her backpack was always packed the night before, her room spotless, her grades impeccable. She spoke the language Dad understood: achievement, planning, excellence. When I was 15, our family fractured irrevocably. Mom's cancer had been in remission, but it returned with a vengeance, taking her within months. The day we buried her was the day I lost both parents, one to death and one to grief. Dad retreated into work and rigid routines, while Amber stepped up, becoming the woman of the house. I retreated into my art, the only place Mom still lived for me. High school was a battleground. While I maintained decent grades, I excelled only in art class, where Mrs. Calloway told me I had real talent. When I brought home my first art award, Dad barely glanced at it. "That's nice, Natalie, but what about your math test?" Meanwhile, Amber's academic achievements warranted dinner celebrations and proud phone calls to relatives. The real collision came during my senior year. I'd been accepted to the prestigious Chicago Institute of Fine Arts, my dream school. The same week, Amber was accepted to Columbia Law School. Dad beamed with pride at Amber's news, immediately talking about helping with her apartment in New York. When I showed him my acceptance letter, his expression soured. "Art school? That's your plan?" He set down his coffee, fixing me with that disappointed stare I knew too well. "Natalie, be reasonable. What kind of career will that get you?" "It's what I love, Dad. It's what I'm good at. Your sister is pursuing something practical. Law school has a return on investment." The argument escalated until he delivered his verdict: "I won't waste money on an art degree. If that's what you want, you'll have to figure it out yourself." So I did. I took out massive student loans, found 3 roommates in a cramped apartment, and worked nights at a diner while attending classes all day. Every holiday break, I returned home to hear about Amber's accomplishments, her internships, her connections, her promising future. Meanwhile, my father would ask probing questions about my hobby and when I planned to pursue a real career. When I graduated with honors, neither Dad nor Amber attended the ceremony. Dad had an important business trip, and Amber was studying for the bar exam. I walked across the stage alone, my mother's absence a physical ache in my chest. I took my diploma back to my apartment, where my roommates had arranged a small celebration. They believed in me even when my family didn't. Armed with my degree and a portfolio bursting with potential, I entered the art world full of hope. I'd show them all, especially Dad, that my passion could become a career, that following my heart hadn't been a mistake. I was naive about how hard the next few years would be, but I was determined. I'd make Mom proud, even if no one else understood. 7 years after graduation, my life looked nothing like I'd imagined. My apartment in Chicago's art district was the size of a shoebox, a fifth-floor walk-up with inconsistent heat and a shower that worked when it felt like it. The space doubled as my studio, with canvases stacked against walls and art supplies occupying every surface. I joked to friends that I didn't have a coffee table because that's where the still life setup goes, but the truth was I couldn't afford one. My days started at 5 a.m., when I'd paint for 2 hours before heading to Groundwork Coffee, where I worked the morning shift as a barista. After my shift ended at 2 p.m., I'd rush across town to teach art classes to elementary school kids at a community center until 6 p.m. 3 nights a week, I also taught adult painting classes at a local wine and paint studio. On my days off, I'd submit my portfolio to galleries, apply for artist residencies, and send pitch emails that mostly went unanswered. My phone calls with Dad had dwindled to monthly check-ins that followed a predictable script. He'd ask about my job situation, sighing audibly when I explained I was still pursuing art while working side gigs. Then he'd inevitably transition to Amber's latest triumph. "Your sister just won a major case, where Amber's being considered for partner already," followed by the unspoken question, "Why can't you be more like her?" My student loan statements arrived monthly with balances that seemed to grow despite my payments. I'd stare at the numbers, calculating how many lattes I needed to make or how many paintings I needed to sell just to keep the interest from consuming me. Sometimes, when rejection emails from galleries piled up, I'd wonder if Dad had been right all along. Last December, I scraped together enough money for a flight home for Christmas. I hadn't seen Dad or Amber in person for over a year, and despite everything, I missed them. I arrived with a carefully wrapped painting for each of them, landscapes I'd spent months perfecting, sacrificing sleep and social outings to complete. Dad's house looked exactly the same, from the tasteful holiday decorations to the family photos that chronicled Amber's achievements while mine faded into the background. Amber arrived an hour after me, sweeping in with designer luggage and holiday gifts in boutique shopping bags. She looked immaculate in her tailored coat and silk scarf, her hair professionally styled, not a hint of the exhaustion I felt constantly. "Nat," she exclaimed, hugging me briefly. "You look artistic." She said it like she was trying to find something positive to say about my thrift store sweater and worn jeans. Dinner was Dad's traditional prime rib, which I barely tasted as he and Amber discussed her career. She'd just won a massive settlement for a corporate client, and Dad couldn't stop beaming. "And I used the bonus to put a down payment on a condo," Amber announced over dessert. "It's in Chelsea, 2 bedrooms with a view of the skyline." "That's my girl," Dad said, raising his wine glass. "Smart investment." "That's amazing, Amber," I offered genuinely. "Congratulations." "What about you, Natalie?" Dad turned to me. "Still in that apartment with the leaky ceiling?" "I've been selling some pieces," I said, trying to infuse my voice with enthusiasm. "A local cafe is displaying my work next month, and I'm teaching more classes." Dad's expression made it clear this didn't qualify as success in his book. "Teaching isn't the same as doing," he remarked. "Actually, I'm doing both," I countered, feeling the familiar defensiveness rise. "My students inspire me, Anne." "Have you considered going back to school?" Dad interrupted. "Get a degree in something practical? Graphic design, maybe? At least that's commercial." "My art is commercial," I insisted. "It's just taking time to." "Time and money," Dad cut in. "How are those loans coming along?" The conversation devolved from there. I mentioned a small grant I'd applied for that might help me focus on my art full-time for a few months. That's when Dad dropped the bomb. "Always looking for handouts," he muttered, shaking his head. "Your sister is successful and responsible unlike you, doesn't need help. She made smart choices, works hard, lives within her means." The room fell silent. Even Amber looked uncomfortable. "Dad," she started, but I was already pushing back from the table. "Excuse me," I managed, fleeing to the guest bathroom where I pressed cold water to my flushed face. When I emerged, I announced I had an early flight the next day and needed to pack. It was a lie, my flight wasn't until the afternoon, but I couldn't bear another minute of comparison. Dad seemed relieved. Amber gave me a strange look I couldn't interpret, but she didn't contradict me. Back in my childhood bedroom, I stared at the ceiling, the weight of disappointment so familiar it felt like an old sweater. My paintings remained wrapped under the tree, my attempt at connection rejected before it was even offered. I texted my roommate that I was coming home early and cried myself to sleep, wondering if I'd ever measure up in my father's eyes. 3 months after that disastrous Christmas dinner, I was working late in my studio. March in Chicago brought freezing rain that tapped against my windows like impatient fingers. I'd been painting for hours, losing myself in a new series exploring family dynamics, therapy on canvas, my roommate called it. My phone rang at 2:17 a.m., an unknown New York number. I almost didn't answer, assuming it was a wrong number, but something made me pick up. "Is this Natalie Winters?" A professional female voice asked. "Yes, who's calling?" I set down my paintbrush, suddenly alert. "This is Nurse Martinez at Mount Sinai Hospital in New York. I'm calling about your sister, Amber Winters. You're listed as her emergency contact." The world tilted sideways. What happened? Is she okay? Your sister was admitted 2 hours ago. She collapsed at her office building. She's stable, but the doctors would like you to come if possible. My mind raced through calculations I couldn't afford. New York. Last-minute flights. Taxi fares. Hotel rooms. Of course, I heard myself say. I'll be there as soon as I can. After hanging up, I sat frozen for exactly 30 seconds before snapping into action. I checked my bank account, $427.32, not enough for everything I'd need. With shaking hands, I pulled out the credit card I kept for absolute emergencies, the one already dangerously close to its limit. I booked the earliest flight I could find, packed a haphazard bag, and texted my managers at both jobs that I had a family emergency. The next few hours passed in a blur. The pre-dawn Uber ride to O'Hare. The crowded economy seat where I couldn't sleep despite my exhaustion. The endless taxi line at LaGuardia. By the time I reached Mount Sinai, I'd been awake for nearly 24 hours, running on nothing but adrenaline and airport coffee. Mount Sinai Hospital stood in stark contrast to the county hospital where I'd had my appendix removed 3 years ago without insurance. Gleaming floors, hushed voices, art on the walls that wasn't just motivational posters. The receptionist directed me to the 10th floor, where a nurse led me to Amber's private room. Nothing prepared me for the sight of my sister in that hospital bed. Amber, always polished, always perfect, looked small and colorless against the white sheets. Her normally immaculate hair lay flat and dull around her face. Without makeup, I could see the dark circles under her eyes, the hollow cheeks, the chapped lips. IV snaked from her arm, and a heart monitor beeped steadily beside her. "She's sleeping now," the nurse explained softly. "The doctor will be by shortly to explain her condition." I sank into the chair beside Amber's bed, studying my sister as if seeing her for the first time. When was the last time I'd really looked at her, beyond the designer clothes and professional demeanor? When had she become so thin? Had those lines around her mouth been there at Christmas? Dr. Shapiro arrived 30 minutes later, a tall woman with kind eyes and a no-nonsense manner. "Your sister is suffering from extreme exhaustion, dehydration, and malnutrition," she explained, consulting the chart. Her blood work also showed concerning levels of alcohol in her system, despite it being a work day. "We're running additional tests, but it appears she's been self-medicating with alcohol for some time." "That can't be right," I said automatically. "Amber doesn't drink much. She's too disciplined for that." Dr. Shapiro's expression was compassionate but firm. "The tests don't lie, Ms. Winters. We also found traces of prescription sleep aids in her system, though we haven't found a prescription in her name." "Has your sister mentioned any sleep issues or anxiety?" I shook my head numbly. "We don't talk much about personal things." After the doctor left, I sat with Amber's still form, trying to reconcile this vulnerable woman with the sister I'd envied and resented for years. When a nurse mentioned Amber would likely sleep through the night, I decided to check on her apartment, hoping to bring back comfortable clothes and toiletries. The doorman at Amber's building recognized my last name and let me up after I showed ID. Amber's apartment key was on her key ring, which the hospital had given me along with her other personal effects. I opened the door to apartment 1203 and stepped into a stranger's life. The condo was exactly what I'd imagined, spacious, with floor-to-ceiling windows showcasing the Manhattan skyline. The furniture was minimal and expensive-looking, in shades of gray and white. Everything was spotless, almost sterile. No dishes in the sink. No mail scattered on counters. No sign that anyone actually lived here. But as I moved through the rooms looking for Amber's bedroom, cracks in the perfect facade emerged. The refrigerator contained nothing but bottled water, condiments, and a withered lemon. The bathroom cabinet revealed multiple prescription bottles, sleeping pills, anti-anxiety medication, antidepressants, all with different doctors' names. The pristine garbage can in the kitchen, when examined more closely, contained several empty wine bottles hidden under paper towels. Amber's bedroom told the most troubling story. Beneath the perfectly made bed, I found more empty bottles. The closet contained impeccably organized work clothes, but the hamper overflowed with unwashed items. On her immaculate desk, work documents were arranged in precise stacks, post-it notes covered in Amber's handwriting with reminders like "Call Johnson Re, brief, urgent, and prep for Matthew's deposition, do not mess this up." One drawer in her nightstand was locked. After searching, I found a small key taped to the bottom of the drawer above it. Inside the locked drawer, a journal, more pill bottles, and a framed photo I remembered from childhood, Amber, Mom, and me at the lake, all of us laughing as Dad took the picture. I'd never seen this photo displayed in Amber's home before. I sank onto the edge of the bed, the perfect apartment suddenly feeling like a movie set, all facade, no substance. Who was my sister, really? And how had I missed the signs that she was drowning? I spent the night in an uncomfortable chair beside Amber's hospital bed, waking every time a nurse came to check vitals or adjust medication. Around 7 a.m., Amber stirred, her eyes fluttering open with momentary confusion before focusing on me. "Natalie?" Her voice was raspy, barely audible. "What are you doing in New York?" "The hospital called me," I explained, pouring her a cup of water. "You collapsed at work. Do you remember?" Amber took the water with a shaking hand. "Vaguely. I was working late, hadn't eaten, felt dizzy in the elevator." She looked around the hospital room, reality dawning slowly. "What day is it?" "Thursday." "You've been here since last night." Panic flashed across her face. "Thursday? I have a deposition this morning. And the Westfield brief is due." "Amber, stop." I gently pushed her back as she tried to sit up. "You're in the hospital. Work can wait." "You don't understand," she insisted, growing agitated. "I can't miss this. Maxwell will give it to Peterson, and I need this case for my partner track consideration." "Your health is more important than any case," I said firmly. She laughed bitterly. "Says who?" "Not Dad. Not my firm." I hesitated, then decided directness was necessary. "I went to your apartment to get you some things. I saw the pills, Amber. And the bottles." The color drained from her already pale face. She turned away, staring at the wall. For a long moment, she said nothing. When she finally spoke, her voice was so soft I had to lean in to hear. "How long have you known?" "I didn't," I admitted. "Not until yesterday." "Amber, why didn't you tell me things were this bad?" "Tell you what? That perfect Amber is a fraud?" Her laugh was hollow. "That I hate my job? That I can't sleep without pills or function without anxiety medication? That sometimes I drink at lunch just to get through the afternoon meetings?" She gestured weakly around the hospital room. "Would that have made you feel better about your life choices?" "This isn't about me," I protested. isn't it? Her eyes, so like our mother's, fixed on mine. Every time Dad compares us, every time he praises me and criticizes you, don't tell me part of you isn't satisfied to see me fail. The accusation stung because there was truth in it. Hadn't I sometimes fantasized about Amber's perfect life crumbling? About Dad finally seeing that his golden child wasn't so golden? Maybe once, I admitted. But not like this, Amber. Never like this. Something in my honesty seemed to break a dam inside her. Tears welled in her eyes, then spilled over as her shoulders began to shake. I'm so tired, Nat, she sobbed. I'm so tired of pretending. Do you know how hard I've worked to create this illusion? 60-hour weeks minimum. No social life. No relationships that last beyond a month because who has the time? All to make partner by 35 because that's what Dad expects. I moved to sit on the edge of her bed, taking her hand. But you've always seemed so, together. So sure this was what you wanted. Because that's what everyone needed me to be. The words burst from her like they'd been imprisoned for years. After Mom died, Dad needed me to be the responsible one. You were falling apart, he was retreating into work, someone had to hold things together. So I became what he wanted, practical, focused, successful. I had no idea, I whispered. Do you know what I do when I can't sleep? She continued, wiping furiously at her tears. I look at your Instagram. I see your paintings, your studio, your artist friends. You're creating something beautiful. Something real. You're living authentically, even if it's hard. She gripped my hand tighter. I envy you, Natalie. I always have. The confession left me speechless. All these years, I'd envied her stability, her success, her ability to make Dad proud. Meanwhile, she'd envied my freedom, my passion, my authenticity. We'd been mirrors reflecting each other's insecurities, neither seeing the full picture. Remember when we were kids? Amber asked, her voice softening. How we used to paint together in the basement. Before Dad started pushing me toward debate club and advanced placement classes? I nodded, the memory washing over me. Amber had been talented, perhaps not as naturally gifted as I was, but enthusiastic and creative. When had that stopped? I still have some of your childhood drawings, I told her. Mom saved them in a folder. She was proud of your art too, you know. Fresh tears welled in her eyes. I miss her so much, Nat. She would have understood. She wouldn't have pushed me into this life. Before I could respond, a commotion at the door interrupted us. Dad burst in, still wearing his overcoat, face lined with worry and fatigue. Amber. He rushed to her bedside, barely acknowledging my presence. What happened? Are you okay? I took the first flight when they called. Just like that, the vulnerable moment between sisters evaporated. I watched Amber's face transform, the mask slipping back into place as she straightened her shoulders despite her weakness. I'm fine, Dad, she said with a forced smile. Just overdid it at work. Nothing serious. Dad turned to me, finally. Natalie. You're here. I am her emergency contact, I said simply. Well, I'm here now. His tone implied I was no longer needed. Have you spoken to her doctors? What's the diagnosis? I started to answer, but a nurse arrived to check Amber's vitals, asking us to step outside. In the hallway, I heard Dad questioning the attending physician in the authoritative tone he'd perfected over decades in business. Words like exhaustion and malnutrition floated between medical terminology. Then the phrase that made him stop cold, alcohol dependency. There must be some mistake, I heard him insist. My daughter doesn't have a drinking problem. Mr. Winters, Dr. Shapiro replied calmly, your daughter's condition suggests long-term issues with nutrition, sleep, and yes, possibly alcohol use as a coping mechanism. This isn't a one-time occurrence. She needs proper treatment and time to recover. How much time? She has responsibilities, a career. I'm recommending at least 6 weeks of leave from work, possibly longer depending on her progress with therapy. 6 weeks? Dad's voice rose in disbelief. That's impossible. She's on track for partner. This could derail her entire career. From my position down the hall, I watched his face as the doctor continued explaining the seriousness of Amber's condition. For the first time in my adult life, I saw my father look genuinely afraid. The hospital cafeteria was nearly empty at 3 p.m., caught in the lull between lunch and dinner. Dad sat alone at a corner table, staring into a cup of coffee that had probably gone cold. After Amber had been sedated for another round of tests, I decided it was time for the conversation we'd been avoiding for years. I slid into the chair across from him, setting down my own coffee. He looked older than he had at Christmas, the lines around his mouth deeper, his shoulders slightly stooped. "How is she?" he asked without looking up. "Sleeping again. They say rest is the best thing for her right now." He nodded absently, turning the coffee cup between his hands. "I spoke with her firm. Took some convincing, but they've agreed to hold her position while she recovers." "That's good," I said carefully. "But maybe what Amber needs isn't to have her job held for her. Maybe she needs a different path altogether." Dad's head snapped up. "What are you talking about?" "She's worked incredibly hard to get where she is. One setback doesn't mean throwing away a career." "It's not a setback, Dad. It's a breaking point." I leaned forward, keeping my voice low but firm. "Have you really looked at her? Talked to her? She's miserable. Has been for years." "That's ridiculous. Amber loves her work. She's always been ambitious." "No, you've always been ambitious for her." The words came out sharper than I intended. "You decided what success should look like for both of us, and when I chose a different path, you wrote me off. But Amber tried to be exactly what you wanted, and look where it got her." His face hardened into the expression I knew too well, jaw set, eyes narrowed. "Don't try to blame me for this, Natalie. And don't use your sister's temporary health issue to justify your own choices." "Temporary?" I felt heat rising in my face. "Dad, she's malnourished. She's been mixing alcohol and prescription drugs. Her apartment looks like a museum, perfect on the surface, empty underneath. There's nothing temporary about what's happening to her." "You're exaggerating. Amber works hard, yes, but she's always been responsible." "Responsible?" I laughed incredulously. "Is it responsible to work until you collapse? To self-medicate instead of asking for help? To live a life that's killing you because you're afraid of disappointing your father? That's enough." Dad's voice cut like steel. "You don't understand the pressures of a high-level career. Your sister—" "My sister told me everything," I interrupted, past caring about his reaction. "This morning, before you arrived. She told me how unhappy she's been, how she envies my life, how she feels trapped in the path you laid out for her." She was emotional and not thinking clearly, he dismissed. "Of course she's stressed, success comes with pressure. But she's strong. She'll bounce back." Something inside me snapped. All the years of feeling inadequate, of watching him praise Amber while dismissing me, of trying to prove my worth through my art, it all boiled over in that sterile cafeteria. "Will you listen to yourself?" I hissed, leaning across the table. "Your daughter is in a hospital bed because she's been slowly killing herself trying to live up to your expectations, and you're worried about her career? When Mom died, you checked out emotionally. You pushed Amber to be perfect and me to be invisible. You've spent years telling me I'm a disappointment while holding Amber up as the gold standard, and neither of us has been allowed to be human." Dad recoiled as if I'd slapped him. "That's not true. I've always supported." "No, you've always judged," I cut in. "You've mistaken achievement for character and success for happiness. And in the process, you've damaged both your daughters. The difference is, I walked away from your approval years ago. Amber's still killing herself trying to earn it." He stood abruptly, chair scraping against the floor. I don't have to listen to this. You've always been emotional, always looking to blame others for your problems. I'm going to check on your sister. As he turned to leave, I delivered the final blow. She started drinking at lunch to get through her workday. Did you know that? She can't sleep without pills. She keeps a photo of us with Mom hidden in a locked drawer because it's too painful to look at every day. When was the last time you really saw her, Dad? Not her achievements or her career, but her. He froze, his back to me, shoulders rigid. For a moment, I thought he might walk away. Instead, he turned slowly, his face ashen. What did you say about a photo? The one from Lake Harriet, I said more quietly. The summer before Mom got sick. Amber keeps it locked away because it hurts too much to remember who we were before. Something in his expression shifted, a crack appearing in the facade he'd maintained for so long. Without another word, he walked out of the cafeteria, leaving me alone with 2 cold coffees and 14 years of unresolved grief. I gave him 30 minutes before returning to Amber's room. When I arrived, the door was closed. Through the small window, I could see Dad sitting beside her bed, his head bowed, shoulders shaking. I'd never seen my father cry before, not even at Mom's funeral. I turned away, giving them privacy. Whatever was happening in that room was between them. My part came next, ensuring Amber got the help she needed, regardless of what Dad thought was best. I approached the nurse's station, asking for Dr. Shapiro. When she appeared, I straightened my shoulders and channeled the confidence I'd developed through years of advocating for my art. I'm taking charge of my sister's aftercare, I announced. I need information on your best recommended treatment programs, therapists specializing in burnout and addiction, and how soon she can be released into my care. Dr. Shapiro studied me for a moment, then nodded. Let me get you that information, Ms. Winters. For the first time in my life, I was the responsible sister, not because Dad said so, but because Amber needed me to be. The next 2 weeks unfolded in a blur of activity. After 3 days in the hospital, Amber was released with strict instructions for rest, nutrition, and follow-up care. Despite Dad's protests that she should return to Minneapolis where he could keep an eye on her, I insisted she stay in New York, in her own space, with me there to help. I can't leave my job in Chicago indefinitely, Dad argued as we sat in Amber's hospital room on discharge day. I already have, I countered, showing him the emails from my managers granting me unpaid leave. Amber needs stability right now, not disruption. And she needs to face her life here, not run away from it. To my surprise, Amber backed me up. I want to stay, Dad, she said quietly. Natalie understands what I need right now. He looked between us, and used to being outnumbered. Finally, he sighed. Fine. But I'll be checking in daily, and I'll fly back at the first sign of trouble. Moving into Amber's pristine apartment felt like entering a museum after hours, forbidden and slightly uncomfortable. I transformed her guest room into my temporary bedroom/studio, setting up an easel by the window that overlooked the city. Amber watched with curious eyes as I unpacked my supplies. You're going to paint here, she asked from the doorway, still moving gingerly after her hospital stay. If that's okay, I replied. I took time off work, but I can't stop creating entirely. I have a commission due next month. I'd like to watch sometime, she said, surprising me. I haven't seen you work since we were kids. The first week was challenging. Amber alternated between restless irritability and bone-deep exhaustion as her body adjusted to proper nutrition and no alcohol. I learned to navigate her moods, to recognize when she needed space and when she needed distraction. I cooked simple meals, gradually reintroducing her to the pleasure of eating rather than just fueling her body to keep working. Organizing her treatment became my full-time job. I researched therapists specializing in high-functioning anxiety and burnout, scheduled appointments, arranged for grocery delivery, and fielded concerned calls from her colleagues. Each night, I'd update Dad, keeping my reports factual and unemotional despite his probing questions about when she might return to work. One rainy afternoon during the second week, I was searching for a spare phone charger when I discovered a stack of sketchbooks in Amber's closet, hidden behind shoe boxes. I brought them to where she sat on the couch, wrapped in a blanket. "I found these," I said, setting them beside her. "I didn't know you still drew." She touched the top sketchbook gingerly, as if it might bite. "I don't, not really. Just sometimes, when I can't sleep or when the anxiety gets bad. It calms me." "May I?" I asked, gesturing to the books. She hesitated, then nodded. I opened the top one to find landscape sketches, city scenes, and portraits, all competently executed, some truly beautiful. The most recent entry was dated just 3 weeks earlier. "Amber, these are good," I said, turning pages carefully. "Really good." "They're just a hobby," she dismissed, but I caught the flicker of pleasure in her eyes. "So is breathing, but it keeps you alive," I countered, handing her the book. "When did you start again?" "About 2 years ago. I was in Paris for a conference and wandered into this little art supply shop. Something about the smell of the pencils, it reminded me of Mom." That evening, we sat together on her balcony, sketchbooks open, drawing the sunset over the Manhattan skyline. We worked in comfortable silence, and for the first time since childhood, I felt truly connected to my sister. By the 3rd week, we'd established a routine. Mornings were for therapy appointments and necessary work communications. Amber's firm had reluctantly agreed to a 3-month medical leave. Afternoons were for rest and gradual reintroduction to joyful activities, museum visits, short walks in Central Park, cooking lessons where I taught Amber simple recipes. One morning, after a particularly productive therapy session, Amber emerged looking thoughtful. "Dr. Bennett suggested I might consider a career change," she said as we walked toward a nearby cafe. "She thinks law was never my passion, just my way of seeking approval." "What do you think?" I asked, careful to keep my tone neutral. "I think she might be right." Amber stopped walking, turning to face me. "But the thought of starting over at 31 terrifies me." "Welcome to my everyday existence," I laughed, then grew serious. "Being scared doesn't mean you're making the wrong choice. Sometimes it means you're finally making your own choice." That afternoon, an unexpected email arrived in my inbox. A gallery owner in Soho, one I'd submitted to months earlier and never heard back from, wanted to see more of my work. Apparently, one of Amber's former clients was a major collector who had seen my portfolio online through Amber's social media share and recommended me. "Did you know about this?" I asked Amber, showing her the email. She smiled sheepishly. "I might have mentioned your work to Howard at the Christmas party. He's always looking for new artists." 2 days later, I stood in the Meridian Gallery, watching as the owner, Eliza Chen, examined my portfolio with serious consideration. "Your work has evolved significantly," she noted, comparing my older pieces to my recent series. "There's an emotional depth here that's compelling. I particularly like these family studies you've been working on during your stay in New York." "Those are very personal," I admitted. "My sister's been my informal model." "I'd like to include 3 pieces in our Emerging Voices show next month," Eliza decided. "With potential for a featured wall in our summer exhibition if they're well received." I left the gallery floating on air, rushing back to Amber's apartment to share the news. For the first time in my career, I had a legitimate gallery interested in my work, not just a coffee shop or community center, but a respected Soho gallery that could launch a real career. Amber celebrated my news with genuine enthusiasm, ordering champagne, sparkling water for herself, and takeout from my favorite Thai place. As we ate dinner on her balcony, she revealed her own decision. "I'm not going back to the firm," she said firmly. "I called the managing partner today and resigned." "Amber. Wow. Are you sure?" She nodded. "For the first time in years, I'm absolutely certain about something. I don't know what's next, but it won't be 70-hour weeks doing work that makes me miserable." "Have you told Dad?" I asked, already anticipating his reaction. "Not yet. I wanted to tell you first." She reached across the table, squeezing my hand. You gave me the courage to do this, Nat. Seeing you pursue your passion despite everything, it made me realize I deserve that too. That night, I called Dad to update him on Amber's progress, carefully omitting her career decision. That news should come from her. As we were about to hang up, he surprised me. "You're doing a good job with her, Natalie," he said, his voice gruff with uncharacteristic emotion. "Better than I could have done." It wasn't quite an apology for years of dismissing my choices, but it was a start. The next morning, I woke to find Amber already up, sitting at her dining table surrounded by papers. "What's all this?" I asked, pouring coffee. "Financial planning," she replied. "I have savings, investments, and my 401k. I've calculated that I can take a year off to figure out my next steps without financial strain." I smiled, recognizing that some aspects of Amber's personality weren't due to Dad's influence but were simply her: the organization, the planning, the thoroughness. The difference was, she was now applying these strengths to build a life she actually wanted. "And I've been thinking," she continued, looking slightly nervous. "What would you think about extending your stay? Not as my caretaker, I'm doing much better, but as my roommate? Just for a few months while you prepare for the gallery show?" I blinked in surprise. "You want me to stay? The guest room is sitting empty, and you said yourself your Chicago apartment is tiny for creating larger pieces. Plus," she hesitated, "I like having you here. I've missed you, Nat. More than I realized." That afternoon, as spring sunshine streamed through the windows of Amber's, our apartment, I set up my largest canvas yet on a new easel we'd purchased together. Amber sat nearby, sketching quietly, occasionally offering observations about my composition. On the kitchen counter, Dad's daily check-in call went to voicemail, unheeded as we lost ourselves in the simple joy of creating side by side, the way we had as children. For the first time in 14 years, it felt like we were both finding our way back to who we were meant to be all along. 6 months passed like a time-lapse sequence in a film, days bleeding into weeks, weeks into months, seasons changing outside the windows of what had become our shared apartment. Autumn in New York brought crisp air and golden light that transformed the city into an artist's dream. Amber flourished in ways I'd never imagined possible. After 3 months of intensive therapy and rest, she began exploring career options that aligned with her natural talents rather than her conditioned expectations. She enrolled in a nonprofit management course, volunteered at an arts education program for underprivileged youth, and even took a ceramics class that left her laughing at her own lopsided creations. "I'm terrible at this," she admitted one evening, showing me a misshapen bowl. "But I love it anyway." "Is this how you feel when you paint?" "Sometimes," I replied. "But it's not about being good immediately. It's about the joy of creating." My own life had transformed just as dramatically. The Emerging Voices show had led to sales and recognition, which expanded into a feature in a local arts magazine. 3 of my pieces sold to private collectors, and Eliza Chen offered me a spot in her winter showcase. For the first time, my bank account contained more than just enough to cover next month's expenses. We'd settled into a comfortable routine in the apartment, each with our own space but coming together for meals, museum visits, and occasional double-date nights with men we'd met in our respective worlds. The tension that had defined our relationship for years had dissolved into a friendship that felt both new and familiar, like rediscovering a favorite childhood book. Dad remained a complex presence in our lives, calling weekly instead of daily now, his tone gradually shifting from concerned oversight to genuine interest. He'd visited twice, awkwardly navigating our new dynamic, clearly unsure of his place in the lives of daughters who no longer sought his approval with the desperation of before. On a crisp October afternoon, as I was preparing for my upcoming solo exhibition, the doorman called to announce an unexpected visitor, our father. "He didn't tell me he was coming," Amber said, looking up from her laptop with surprise. "Did he call you?" I shook my head, setting down my paintbrush. "Maybe he was in town for business?" When Dad entered the apartment, I was struck by how much older he looked, not physically, but in the way he carried himself. The commanding presence that had dominated our childhood seemed diminished, replaced by something more tentative, more human. "The place looks different," he remarked, glancing around at the changes we'd made. Amber's sterile designer furniture had been supplemented with colorful throw pillows, bookshelves filled with art books and novels, and walls now adorned with both her photography and my paintings. "We've made it ours," Amber replied simply. "Would you like some coffee?" We were about to take a break anyway. Over coffee at the dining table, now bearing paint stains and ceramic clay residue, Dad cleared his throat awkwardly. "I owe you both an apology," he said, the words clearly difficult for him. "I've been doing a lot of thinking since the hospital. About the kind of father I've been." Amber and I exchanged glances, neither of us sure how to respond to this unprecedented vulnerability. "After your mother died," he continued, staring into his coffee, "I was lost. She was always the one who understood you both in ways I couldn't. Without her, I defaulted to what I knew: achievement, security, traditional success. I thought if I pushed you toward stable, respectable careers, I'd be protecting you from hardship." "Dad," Amber began, but he held up a hand. "Please, let me finish. I need to say this." He looked up, meeting first her eyes, then mine. "I was wrong. I confused financial security with happiness, achievement with fulfillment. Seeing you in that hospital bed, Amber, it forced me to face what my expectations had done to you. And Natalie, watching you care for your sister, seeing your art flourishing despite my lack of support, it made me realize how wrong I'd been about what constitutes success." The silence that followed felt weighted with 14 years of unspoken pain and misunderstanding. Finally, I spoke. "Why now, Dad? What really brought you here today?" He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper, sliding it across the table. "I found this while cleaning out some old files. It seemed relevant." Amber unfolded the paper, a crayon drawing clearly done by a child, showing 3 stick figures: a tall man, a medium woman with yellow hair, and a small girl with a big smile. At the bottom, in childish handwriting, "Daddy, Mommy, me" by Amber, age 6. "Turn it over," Dad said quietly. On the back, in our mother's handwriting, "Thomas, Amber's career aspirations this week, artist like Natalie. Remember, success isn't measured by paychecks but by joy. Love, Diane." Tears welled in Amber's eyes as she passed the drawing to me. "Mom wrote this?" Dad nodded. "She left little notes like this everywhere. I found dozens after she died, tucked into books, taped to files, slipped into my briefcase. This one. I must have filed it away and forgotten about it until I started organizing my office last week." "She always knew who we really were," I said softly, tracing my mother's handwriting with my fingertip. "She did," Dad agreed. "And I should have listened to her. Instead, I tried to reshape you both into what I thought you should be, especially after she was gone. I was so afraid of failing you that I didn't see I was harming you." Amber reached across the table, taking Dad's hand. "We understand, Dad. We lost her too." "I'm not asking for forgiveness," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "Just a chance to know who my daughters really are, not who I tried to make you be." That evening, the 3 of us went to dinner at a small Italian restaurant near the apartment. The conversation was hesitant at first, decades of communication patterns difficult to break. But as the meal progressed, something shifted. Dad asked about my upcoming exhibition with genuine interest. Amber spoke openly about her uncertainty regarding her next career move. For perhaps the first time, we related to each other as adults, imperfect, evolving, authentic. 6 weeks later, I stood in the Meridian Gallery surrounded by my work, 15 pieces exploring family, identity, and transformation. The centerpiece was a large canvas titled Reflections, showing 2 women standing back to back, their reflections in opposing mirrors revealing not their physical selves but their inner spirits. The opening night crowd circulated through the space, glasses of wine in hand, murmuring appreciatively. Amber moved among them confidently, having discovered a talent for networking and promotion that now served my career rather than a corporate law firm's interests. And there, somewhat out of place in his conservative suit but making a visible effort to engage, was our father. He stood before reflections for a long time, studying the interplay of the sisters in the painting, the subtle symbolism of broken and mended frames around the mirrors. "This is extraordinary, Natalie," he said when I approached. "I can feel the emotion in it." "It's about Amber and me," I explained. "How we saw distorted versions of each other for so long." "And where do I fit in this new understanding?" he asked, vulnerability evident in his question. I pointed to a small figure in the background of the painting, a man facing away, his reflection beginning to turn back toward the women. There. Still part of the story, just evolving. The night ended with unexpected success, 12 pieces sold, including reflections, purchased by a prominent collector. As we celebrated back at the apartment, Amber made an announcement of her own. "I've decided what I'm doing next," she said, eyes bright with excitement. "I'm launching a consulting firm for artists and creative small businesses, helping with the business side that so many creative people struggle with. Legal structures, contracts, financial planning, marketing strategies." "That's perfect," I said, recognizing how it combined her organizational skills and legal knowledge with her newfound appreciation for creative pursuits. "I already have my first client," she added with a grin, pointing at me. Dad raised his glass. "To new beginnings, on your own terms." As we clinked glasses, I reflected on the journey that had brought us here. From a lifetime of comparison and resentment to genuine understanding and support. From a family fractured by grief and misunderstanding to one slowly healing through honesty and acceptance. Success and responsibility meant something different now than what our father had originally defined. True responsibility wasn't about meeting others' expectations but about being true to yourself while supporting those you love. Real success wasn't measured in paychecks or prestige but in authenticity, connection, and growth. Looking at my sister, healthier, happier, forging her own path, and my father, humbled, learning, trying, I felt a sense of peace I hadn't known was possible. The family black sheep and golden child labels had finally dissolved, allowing us all to simply be human together, flawed, complex, and real. What about you? Has your family ever put you in a box or compared you to siblings? Have you found the courage to define success on your own terms? Share your experiences in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share with someone who might need to hear it. Remember, sometimes the person who seems to have it all together is struggling the most, and the unsuccessful one might be the truest success of all. Thank you for joining me on this journey. Until next time, be authentic, be kind, and be your own measure of success.